Merci. Thank you for joining us today here on the traditional territory of the Algonquin people. In about 90 minutes, the House will vote on Bill C-3. This is an opportunity for all members of all parties to stand and be counted on a critical issue for Canadians. Nous sommes tous d'accord que les agressions sexuelles sont un crime méprisable. Notre gouvernement est fermement engagé à ce que les survivants d'agressions sexuelles soient traités avec le respect et la dignité qu'ils méritent. Canadians expect that judges should have the necessary training to understand the complex nature of cases involving sexual assault and the myths that too often surround them. They also expect their leaders to work across party lines to bring about change. That's why we introduced Bill C-3, based on a private member's bill put forward by former Conservative Party interim leader Rona Ambrose. Le projet de loi C-3 renforce les exigences en matière de formation pour les juges nouvellement nommés et les renseigne sur les mythes et les stéréotypes qui entourent les agressions sexuelles. Ce projet de loi permet également d'assurer que les juges nouvellement nommés participent à des formations plus générales sur le contexte social, incluant les facteurs sociaux et culturels qui peuvent affecter les interactions entre le système de justice et les individus. I want to acknowledge the leadership shown by the Canadian Judicial Council on this important issue. C'est important de souligner que C3 respecte le principe de l'indépendance judiciaire, qui est essentiel à la confiance du public et au cœur de notre système. That is why the National Judicial Institute, the NJI, which is internationally recognized for its work on judicial education, would provide the required training to the newly appointed judges. In the last Parliament, this bill had all-party support in the House. I have been discouraged to hear some Conservative members criticize C-3 as unnecessary. C-3 will help enhance the confidence of survivors of sexual assault and the Canadian public more broadly in our justice system. It was in that spirit that all parties supported this legislation in the previous Parliament, and I invite my Conservative colleagues to do so again. And I would like to invite my colleague, Minister Maryam Monsef, Minister for Women and Gender Equality, to make a few comments.
Well, thank you very much, David. Hello, colleagues. Bonjour, Ani, salam alaikum. We are on traditional Algonquin territory during Women's History Month. And let me also begin with the deep trust and respect that we all have in our judiciary. Our justice system is a powerful lever for systemic change. And when it works, it provides healing for those who have come forward. And when it doesn't, it leads to cycles of pains caused by justice denied. This bill, Bill C-3, is deeply important to survivors of sexual assault and gender-based violence. It is a small but significant step forward for them and for us all. We've had this debate over and over again in the House of Commons. Advocates and survivors have shared these stories for decades upon decades. I thank my colleagues in the House of Commons for their thoughtful debate on the matter, and I'm hopeful that we will get cross-party support to move this forward, because survivors and victims in every single community in this country are counting on us, and because there's so much more to do to address and prevent gender-based violence. Judges are professionals like the rest of us, and I know that they like to continually add to their professional development. The trauma-informed, culturally sensitive training that will be developed with experts and with survivors will do just that. It will help all of us do right by survivors of gender-based violence. So this bill is really for every survivor who's come forward, who's had the courage to come forward. And this bill is also for every survivor and victim whose story we may never know. If about 5% of sexual assault cases are ever reported, if they don't lead to convictions, if the system ends up re-traumatizing survivors, if the outcomes embolden a culture of impunity, then we have a problem. And that is the problem that this bill is seeking to address, one small but meaningful step for survivors. And let me be clear, this isn't just about a few bad apples. This is about systems and about cultures that enable sexual and gendered violence, that make victims feel ashamed and less likely to come forward and to report, that lead to cases where they are not believed and cases where they are further traumatized. The Me Too movement, Time's Up, Been Raped, Never Reported, the unfounded conversations have taught us that this is about deeply rooted attitudes and beliefs. It's about a culture of impunity, also known as rape culture, a sociological concept for a setting in which rape is pervasive and normalized due to societal attitudes about gender and sexuality. Behaviors commonly associated with rape culture include victim blaming, slut-shaming, sexual objectification, trivialization of rape, denial of widespread rape, refusing to acknowledge the harm caused by sexual violence, or some combination of these. A culture of impunity is the result. For us to address this, to do this work, it is so much more than appointing the right people. It's about recognizing that our systems are far from perfect and that we all need to do the work. And yes, that means there is need for ongoing training for even the very best of judges. This isn't work that you finish by picking the right people. This is work that we all have to engage in until the systems are fixed. And that's going to be generations of work, and it's work that we are all committed to. I look forward to this bill receiving broad support in the House of Commons and in the Senate. Colleagues, we are happy to take your questions now.
So we'll now take questions, starting with questions on the phone. A quick reminder, one question, one follow-up. We have about 10 minutes for question. Operator, do we have a first question?
Yes, oui. La première question, the first question est de Marie Vastel du Devoir. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
Oui, bonjour, Monsieur Lametti. Ma question est pour vous, en fait, sur un autre sujet, si je peux me permettre. Vous avez sûrement, ou votre équipe, vu un texte dans le Devoir ce matin au sujet d'un groupe de citoyens qui demande à votre gouvernement de lancer une enquête suite à ce qu'il allègue être du recrutement illégal de soldats au Canada par le consulat d'Israël à Toronto. Ces gens-là allèguent que le consulat fait du recrutement pour l'armée israélienne et que ça pourrait enfreindre la loi sur l'enrôlement à l'étranger. J'aimerais obtenir votre réaction. Est-ce que vous comptez faire une enquête telle qu'on vous le demande et qu'est-ce que vous pensez de ces allégations?
Donc, d'abord, merci pour la question. Nous avons, en tant que pays, des relations avec Israël. Nous avons aussi des relations personnelles avec les citoyens en Israël. Ceci dit, il faut que les diplomates dans un autre pays, donc les diplomates d'Israël qui sont ici, de suivre la loi canadienne. D'habitude, au Canada, c'est une question pour les enquêteurs de la police de décider s'il y a eu des infractions et puis au service des poursuites pénales de déterminer s'il y a lieu de procéder avec les charges formelles. Et donc, je vais laisser la décision aux institutions qu'on a au Canada pour suivre la situation.
Un suivi?
Oui, pardon. En même temps, M. Lametti, vous êtes interpellé personnellement dans une lettre qui a été envoyée à votre bureau ce matin, notamment parce qu'il s'agit de diplomates, donc on demande au gouvernement lui-même de s'en mêler. Est-ce que vous allez regarder ça ou vous en lavez complètement les mains?
Évidemment, je lis ce qui arrive sur mon bureau, mais je dois vous dire qu'on a des institutions au Canada qui sont responsables pour réagir aux telles situations. Ce n'est pas exactement les mêmes institutions dans d'autres pays. Et donc, comme j'ai dit dans la première réponse, je vais laisser la place aux personnes responsables au Canada de faire ce qu'il faut faire.
Nous allons maintenant prendre une autre question dans la salle. We'll now take a question from the room. David?
Hey, David Thurton here. Oops. My pen. Yes. So can you tell us maybe how you're going to make sure that this bill makes it all the way to the Senate and to royal assent and doesn't get tied up and ends up dying and forgotten?
Well, this is the third time through. The first time it was a private member's bill, and so as a government, we didn't have as much control in the Senate over the timetable for the legislation. So we were hoping in February, and we're hoping again now, that the fact that it is a government bill means that we will be able to prioritize its passage in the Senate. So we hope to get it across the finish line as soon as possible. Again, there should be all-party consensus here. I mean, this is something that I think most Canadians agree on. It's something that Rona Ambrose was quite convincing on, and we therefore supported the bill at the time as a private member's bill. But now we're government, and we're going to do our best to make sure that it gets through.
Minister Monsef, you mentioned in your remarks that you were a little disappointed to hear that there were some opposition MPs who weren't as open to supporting it. Can you tell us what you meant by that?
This is a bill that has, as David mentioned, been considered common sense in the House of Commons. And we all thought that given the third anniversary of the Me Too movement, given the reckoning that is happening around the world about systemic changes needed to be made, around gender equality being key to our economy's recovery post-COVID, that this bill would move forward in an efficient way. And yet we're hearing from some of our conservative colleagues questions about the value of something like this. I would urge all my colleagues to support this. Any step forward on the issue of sexual assault and gender-based violence is a huge step forward for those who have been advocating for it for decades upon decades. And this is a small but meaningful step. And after this, there is a series of other measures that we all have to work together on. This can't become a partisan issue, not in 2020.
We'll go back to the phone before coming back to the room. Do we have another question on the phone, opératrice?
Oui, merci. Catherine Lévesque, la presse canadienne. Please go ahead, à vous la parole.
Oui, bonjour. Ma première question pour M. Lametti. Vous avez dit effectivement qu'il y a de l'opposition de la part des banquettes conservatrices. Je m'en demandais quelles sont leurs critiques, qu'est-ce qu'ils ont à dire à propos de ce projet de loi. Est-ce que vous vous attendez à ce que les conservateurs votent en bloc contre le projet de loi ou on parle juste de quelques personnes?
C'est difficile vraiment à comprendre l'opposition, vu que la première fois, quand Mme Ambrose l'avait proposé, on avait un consensus unanime dans la Chambre des communes. Donc, espérons que ce soit uniquement quelques personnes. On a entendu même de M. O'Toole qui aura des amendements à proposer. Il faut voir, évidemment, on a le processus devant le comité, justement pour proposer les amendements et les modifications. Donc, on verra. Mais pour l'instant, de ma connaissance, j'ai vu vraiment rien de précis autre des observations générales comme il faut plus de temps, etc. Il ne faut pas plus de temps. On l'a vu, c'est la troisième fois qu'on le voit. C'est vraiment le temps de passer la loi.
OK, so, sorry.
Ils veulent répéter.
Est-ce que je peux le faire? Est-ce que je vais répondre à une autre question et puis le traduire en anglais ou est-ce que je vais faire la traduction tout de suite?
Tout de suite et on reviendra à Catherine pour son suivi.
OK, parfait. So, I haven't, to be perfectly honest with you, I don't understand the opposition. The first time we went through this bill when it was proposed by Rona Ambrose, we had unanimous consent in the House of Commons, and so we as Maryam has pointed out, we were hoping to get that same kind of consensus this time around. We expected it. I don't think there will be general opposition on the Conservative benches. I tend to think it will be individual people, but we're only hearing sort of very vague comments such as we need more time to study it and that sort of thing. We don't need more time to study it. This is the third time through. If there are any proposed modifications or amendments, they can be studied at committee. That's what committee's for.
Tu peux y aller pour ton suivi, Catherine?
I'm just going to turn to Minister Monsef now. In your remarks, Minister Monsef, you talked about that in the justice system, that it's not just about a few bad apples. I was just wondering what you're implying by that about the system for victims.
I think we've all heard stories of survivors who have taken their cases to court and have been re-traumatized by the experience. The why couldn't you have just kept your knees together comment being one of many. But we know that when it comes to issues of equality, our justice system continues to evolve and improve. We had heard from one of our conservative colleagues that, this bill is not necessary, that the issues would be solved by simply appointing different people. Well, I would say that we are appointing highly competent professionals to the bench, and the diversity in our federal systems are improving with every single appointment. That is an important step forward, but not the only step to take. Our systems have sometimes and too often let down those who have come forward with issues around gender-based violence. The Gladue case being another one that comes to mind. We have to address the underlying issues that far too often lead to survivors and victims being traumatized. And training, professional development opportunities like this help shape and enhance those cultures and lead to better outcomes for survivors.
Next question in the room, Lee.
Sure. Lee Berthium, Canadian Press. I wanted to ask, the purpose of this bill, is it to better support complainants and those who have been victims of sexual assaults and other crimes, or is it to increase convictions?
If more people come forward when they have experienced sexual assaults, if they reported more than the 5% or so that are coming forward now, that's success. If more people come forward and realize that their justice systems will lead to justice, that will treat them with dignity and with respect, then more people will come forward and seek justice. So it's a small measure that actually will have significant impacts and address this culture of impunity, where far too often perpetrators get away with the crimes and sometimes go on to do it again and again. And survivors and victims are told again and again that their issues are not important and that they ought not to seek justice. Well, in Canada, we can do better than that. And there's widespread support among experts, survivors, even here, for us to move forward. So any delay at this point is pure partisanship that I think we are all tired of.
And I would ask Mr. Lametti, do you think it's appropriate within a system where the independence of the judiciary is essential for support groups and sexual assault victims to be working with judges to develop this type of training? And as a bit of a follow-up, do you expect other issues? I mean, we've seen concerns about Indigenous conviction rates and things like that. Will you be looking at legislation for training around systemic racism and Indigenous issues for judges?
Well, thank you for that question. Let me just add on to the previous answer from Maryam, because it's linked to the follow-up, which is, I view this as the integrity of the justice system and the ability of the justice system to get better outcomes generally, the ability of the justice system to inspire confidence, and in particular confidence amongst victims of sexual assault. If a judge manages his or her courtroom better as a result of training, such that a victim isn't re-traumatized, we've got a better outcome. No matter what happens, we've got a better outcome. And that's the confidence that we're trying to get back in the system, and it goes along with everything else. With respect to judicial independence, we believe we've carefully crafted this bill around the principle of judicial independence, which is fundamental to what we're doing. As you know, in the parameters of this bill, what we're doing is we're asking applicants to agree to have sexual assault training, social context training, as a condition of their appointment. So we have that bit of leverage, if you will, at the outset, which doesn't go to the principle of judicial independence. We're very proud of the CJC, the Canadian Judicial Council, and the NJR, the National Judicial Institute, for the training that they do. We're trying to work with them And they will reach out, as they have already done in some cases. They will reach out and develop the programming, working with survivors, so that we get good, proper, sensitive training, sensitivity training for sexual assault, also social context. And we're going to work closely with them, full well recognizing that they are independent and therefore they have the responsibility, primary responsibility of doing it. With respect to larger issues, look, I have said publicly that there is systemic racism in our Canadian justice system, and I have vowed to try to root out, to identify it and root it out. We name it, we identify it, and then we try to fix it. Other colleagues around the table, I think of Minister Miller, for example, Minister Blair, they've done the same thing. So we are, I hope, pushing the conversation in the right direction, and we're open to all possibilities, and in particular, in this case, working with the CJC and the NJI to create culturally appropriate kinds of training for judges, so that, again, we get better outcomes, and again, it serves the integrity of the justice system and inspires confidence in the system.
And I'll check one last time if there's one last question on the phone. Operator?
Yes, certainly. Merci. Joan Bryden from the Canadian Press. À vous la parole. Please go ahead.
You've pretty much answered the questions that I had, but I was just wondering, I guess, would you make an appeal to Mr. O'Toole in particular to have his members vote for this?
Well, thank you for that question. Certainly, we would like to see Mr. O'Toole show leadership with respect. I believe he has said he will support it, although he has hinted that he may have some proposed amendments down the road, which we have yet to see. But we hope that he'll exercise leadership in his caucus. Again, it's one of his former leaders, in fact, and one of his former caucus mates that proposed this bill in the first place. So we're hoping, once again, to get all party support. We know we have the support of the Green Party. We know we have the support of the Bloc and the NDP, and therefore we hope the Conservatives will also be moved, and hopefully their leader will play a role in moving them.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, that's good. Thanks.
Thank you. This concludes this press conference. Ceci m'a fait à la conférence de presse.